Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie. In this video, I'm going to be looking at the week starting on Monday, December the 30th, 2024. So this video is a preview. It's a preview of some of the main events astrologically taking place over the course of a week, and it's short. And the reason I have got a shark on the thumbnail is because I want to look at Venus in Pisces. You know, one of the events of the week is Venus moving into this sign. Of course, shark is a fish. I mean, normally when you think about Pisces, you think about perhaps more innocuous fishes, but we shouldn't forget that shark are fish, and maybe sharks do say something about the way Pisceans function. I mean, I'm just speculating there. Anyway, we'll see when I have a detailed look at Venus in Pisces, because that is one of the things I want to do in this video. Have a look at a few people who do have Venus in this sign. And so that's my theme, if you like, Venus in Pisces, when I've done the preview of the week's main events. And then at the end of the video, I will be doing an I Ching, when I'll be looking at what's going on for those watching the I Ching section of this video. And also I'll have in the I Ching section, I'll be looking at generally what's happening, and then I'll look at money, and then career, and then relationships. Anyway, let's start off by looking at what is happening this week. So here is the chart for the beginning of the week, the moment the new week starts at midnight. I've said it for New York, but I mean, it doesn't really matter. So, I mean, the first thing to note is that at the beginning of a week, midnight on Monday, December the 30th, the moon has just moved into Capricorn. Of course, that is New York time. So if you're in Australia or New Zealand, the week will start with the moon in late Sagittarius. So the moon and the sun are both in Capricorn. So that means we've got to run up to a new moon. And so this new moon, which is exact on Monday, okay, I think it's going to be exact on Tuesday if you are in Australia or New Zealand. But anyway, beginning of a week, there is this new moon. And so it's a Monday, it's a new moon, and it is the last week of the year. So you could say, in a way, that the new year begins on Monday, even though it's December the 30th, because it's a new moon, beginning of a new lunar cycle. And for many of us, I think the fact that the old lunar cycle is over, I don't know, I think it might be something of a relief. I don't know, this last lunar cycle has been somewhat difficult. It's been a little bit destabilizing. And of course, if you've been following the markets, right at the end of this lunar cycle, we've seen the markets being somewhat unstable. And I think part of the reason for that might have been comments about interest rates by the Fed chair, Jerome Powell, and the fact that there might be fewer interest rate cuts next year. And so, there has been a certain sense of gloom at the end of the year, and I think a lot of people are worried. And so, new lunar cycle, new moon in Capricorn, that might be something to look forward to. I'd like to say more about the new moon. I mean, I suppose the obvious things are to say, yeah, it is a new moon. It's, if you've got something you want to start on, right, you should really be waiting until the new moon. You don't want to start something just before the new moon, because you're starting something on the dying cycle, and that's not something you want to align yourself. But in my video for Monday, which will be the next video I do, I will be looking at this new moon in detail. And that is very much the main event of the week. Jumping forward to Friday, I can't see any huge events between Monday and Friday. Maybe I've missed something, but jumping forward to Friday, we have got Venus moving into Pisces. So the week starts with Venus at 25 Aquarius, and by Friday it does make that move into Pisces, and that is a change. And I suppose you could say it's the slow beginning of the Pisces season. I mean, Venus and the Sun and Venus are a long way from each other. I mean, the Sun geocentrically is always quite close to Venus, but Venus right at the moment is, over, what is it, around 47? I think it's about 47 degrees from the Sun. So it's a long way off the Sun, and so the Pisces season is kind of starting. Of course, the Sun doesn't go into Pisces until the end of February, but so it's quite a long way away. But still, it is starting. Venus moving into Pisces, moving out of an air sign into a water sign. That is perhaps going to change the dynamic, and it's possibly good news in terms of the fact that Venus is moving into its exaltation. But in fact, I'll talk about that later in the video. I don't want to go into details about Venus in Pisces right now. Now, on that same day that Venus moves into Pisces, we have the Sun making a quincunx to Jupiter, and we have Mercury making a quincunx to Uranus. So on that Friday, the Sun will be Sun will be making a quincunx to Jupiter. It'll be 150 degrees from Jupiter. Quincunx can be a little bit difficult. The question is, how do we bring Jupiter into our immediate sphere? If there's something we know we want to do, but we don't necessarily want to do it, we want to avoid it. It's at Jupiter. Jupiter can be a little bit excessive, particularly perhaps in Gemini retrograde, and we perhaps want to avoid anything excessive, anything that pushes us too far, but at the same time we know it's important. And then we've got Mercury quincunx Uranus, so Mercury at around 23, 24 Sagittarius will make the quincunx to Uranus, so that might be about a challenge, something we have to take into account. Uranus can be something we hadn't really allowed for, we weren't expecting, but it happens. And then we've got Mars opposition Pluto. I think the Mars opposition Pluto is an important aspect. So we've had Mars opposition Pluto before. We had Mars opposition Pluto, I think, around the time of the election, and then Mars went forward, and then it went retrograde. So Mars is moving back onto the opposition of Pluto, and that's certainly something I want to talk a lot about on Friday. Probably on Friday, Mars opposition Pluto is going to be my main theme, and so we've got Mars right at the beginning of Leo, opposition Pluto, right at the beginning of Aquarius, and Mars opposition Pluto can be about power and pushing things too far, and there may be a struggle there. And yeah, that is an aspect I will be talking about in detail on Friday. And after that, the week kind of calms down a bit in theory. I mean, over the weekend, we've got Mercury biquintile Mars. Perhaps that is trying to create a vibrant and communicative style. We've got Sun sextile Saturn. We've got, Sun in Capricorn making a sextile to Saturn. That's quite a good aspect. It allows us to stabilize things, to take control of the situation. And so that's useful, very grounded, and it's perhaps a good aspect which, in terms of allowing us to sort of get on with achieving whatever we feel we need to achieve, but in a sort of slow, down-to-earth kind of way. And then on Sunday we've got Sun quintile Neptune. I think Sun quintile Neptune could be about our spiritual aspirations and or perhaps the effect we are trying to create, trying to perhaps bring our imagination down to earth. But I'll talk about that at the end of the week. So now I want to consider just Venus in Pisces. So Venus is exalted in Pisces. So Venus, in theory, works extremely well in this sign. So in the same way that Venus is fallen in Virgo. So one of the worst signs for Venus to be in is Virgo. Now, if you've got Venus in Virgo, don't worry about it. In fact, with Venus in Virgo, Venus is the ruler of the earth signs by day. So in fact, if you've got Venus in Virgo and you're born in the hours of daylight, your Venus actually has some dignity by triplicity. And people have Venus in Virgo, they work out how best to use Venus in Virgo, and there's nothing wrong with having Venus in Virgo. But perhaps if you're dealing with just events and what's happening at a particular time, you do have to consider perhaps Venus in Virgo might be problematic. And then Venus in Pisces, by contrast, it's exalted, and Venus is a fairly sensitive planet. It's a feminine planet, so it kind of makes sense that it works well in Pisces. Although you could say Venus in Scorpio, Venus doesn't work so well in Scorpio because Venus is in its detriment in Scorpio. And I suppose with Venus in Pisces, you could say, well, Venus is a benefic, and so it's kind of nice that Venus is in a sign ruled by Jupiter. That might be part of the logic. And so with Venus in Pisces, one can be sensitive and one can understand the world in which one is living, and perhaps one can be sympathetic to other people. And at the same time, if you emotionally understand what's happening in terms of other people and what they're thinking and what they're feeling, there is a danger that you misuse the situation. You have power and you have an emotional sensitivity, and you can perhaps use that sensitivity to do things which sometimes may not be very nice. And maybe it is reasonable to see a shark as being somehow symbolic of Venus in Pisces. At least some people with Venus in Pisces. The shark has its own advantages, and the shark is very sensitive. The shark can, I don't know if, according to Jaws, did you ever read that book, Jaws? I think I did actually read Jaws once. And it sort of mentions a shark being able to smell blood in at tiny, tiny concentrations in water. And so maybe that represents the sensitivity of some people with Venus in Pisces. And Venus in Pisces might just also represent strategic skill, because you understand the way that things are moving. So I thought it'd be a good idea to just look at a few people who have Venus in Pisces. Of course, as always, it's just a very biased sample, not necessarily people who are typical of Venus in Pisces, maybe not. But I think they are kind of exaggerations of what Venus in Pisces is like. So, as always with these descriptions of the signs, it is, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and maybe just people who are just plain famous. If you've got Venus in Pisces, that could perhaps allow you to understand what people wanted. So if you are a musician, you don't just understand what people want, you understand perhaps what people want at a particular time. So, for example, Victoria Beckham, born April the 17th, 1974, I suppose she perhaps gives the impression of a woman who sort of knows how to look after herself, who's very focused on her ambitions. She's an Aries, and she's got, in fact, she's got a conjunction between Mars and Saturn. Now, that's quite tough, that conjunction between Mars and Saturn. But she does have Venus in Pisces. So that Venus in Pisces conjunct Jupiter, she's got Venus-Jupiter conjunction in Pisces. That is a wonderful conjunction. And maybe that Venus-Jupiter conjunction in Pisces is a secret of her success. She just naturally knows perhaps what people want, what is fashionable at a particular time. I suppose getting involved with the Spice Girls, she was that in the 90s. She was able to be part of something which was popular then. That's what everyone wanted. She was able to give it to them, Venus in Pisces. Then her getting involved in fashion, marrying David Beckham. It all worked very well. So at an emotional level, she was able to look after herself and make decisions which turned out to be absolutely right. And that can be the key to success, having a lot of water. I mean, look at Elon Musk, for example. Elon Musk doesn't have Venus in Pisces, but he has a sun in Cancer. Elon Musk is I think he's the richest person in the world. It's just because maybe it's not just because he's inventive, it's just because he understands the vibe, and he understands it at an emotional level. Another musician, singer who's got Venus in Pisces is Celine Dion. I don't really know anything about her, actually, but I know she's Canadian, and I know she's very successful, and I think she's had some health problems, quite serious health problems. But, she has Venus in Pisces, Venus opposition Pluto in Pisces. Was it Celine Dion who did that thing with the Titanic? Was she some song about the Titanic? Or, I don't know. I never actually saw that film, but I know it was a big hit. And I suppose that's Venus in Pisces. There's a sort of a nautical theme to Venus in Pisces, which maybe that all had a part in how she was able to communicate. And her Venus in Pisces, it may be opposition Pluto, but it is conjunct Mercury. I know that Mercury in Pisces doesn't work particularly well, because Mercury is in its fall detriment as well. Venus works really. Mercury is ruler of Virgo, so in Pisces Mercury can be a bit difficult. But Mercury is conjunct Venus, and so Mercury-Venus as a conjunction can be very artistic and can be very successful, and knows how to project itself and knows how to create. So her Mercury-Venus conjunction in Pisces would appear to be working extremely well. So if you have got Venus in Pisces, you can certainly be successful. So here is an example of a successful businesswoman, Angela Chow. I think she was successful through shipping. And what's interesting about Angela Chow is not just her life, but her death. So Angela Chow, she was a clever woman. She went to Harvard. She graduated in 3 years. I think she got involved in shipping, and so she was a very successful businesswoman. And there is her Venus in Pisces, but her Venus was moving to a square of Neptune, and in the end it made us. And I suppose she has Venus, Neptune, and a Neptune-Saturn opposition, a wide Neptune-Saturn opposition. But that Venus-Neptune, that has a nautical theme, doesn't it? And then there is, I don't have a time of birth for Angela Chow, but she died in her Tesla. She was at a party in Texas, and she died. And so here is actually the chart of her death. I believe she died around midnight on February the 11th, 2024. And I'm not saying anything spectacular was going on at the time of her death. There was a Moon-Saturn conjunction in Pisces. So if we compare, there's Angela Chow. Again, don't have a time of birth for her. So Angela Chow is in the middle. Angela Chow had the Moon in Pisces, and she had the Venus in Pisces. And she may have had a lunar return roughly at the time she died, and that there was a sort of Moon-Saturn conjunction was just separating on the evening of her death. And how did she die? Well, yeah, she died in her Tesla, and she drove into a pond, and she couldn't get out, and so that's how she died. And so you could say, in her case, Venus in Pisces, Venus in a water sign, did say something about her death and how it happened. And I suppose it was her time. And she was interestingly 51, the age of approximately 51. I think she was. How old was she when she died? She was coming up to her 51st birthday, and the 51st birthday, 51. You hear that 51. 51 is it's 3 times 17, and it's also one's Chiron return. So she had her Chiron in Aries, and at the time she died, Chiron was just past her Chiron. She'd just finished with her Chiron return. So that's Angela Chow. So another chart with a nautical theme, or at least with a watery theme, would be Alexander Marinesco. Now, Alexander Marinesco, I do look at his chart every now and then because it just keeps cropping up. Alexander Marinesco is, in terms of the Soviet Union, the Soviet Union during the Second World War did not have, in terms of its navy, it wasn't really very successful. I don't know. Russia has always had a problem with its navy. I mean, even now, with the Black Sea, you don't really hear much about the Russian Black Sea fleet. I mean, even you go back to a Battle of Tsushima. Was it 1905? Was it the Battle of Tsushima? Or was it 1904? I think it was 1904 when the Russian navy was destroyed by the Japanese. So there's always been an issue with Russia and its navy. But Alexander Marinesco was the most successful Soviet submariner during the Second World War in terms of tonnage sunk. And so it was Alexander Marinesco who sank the Wilhelm Gustloff, which was basically, I think, the biggest shipping tragedy ever. I think it could have been up to 10,000 people were killed when he torpedoed a. I mean, it was a sort of a liner full of people fleeing Prussia, and there were military people on board, and so. This is so. It's kind of not surprising that Russia's most successful submariner has Venus in Pisces. So there's his Venus in Pisces. His Venus is actually sesquiquadrate Neptune. So perhaps this is why I put a picture of a shark. Pisces can be a bit of a shark, underwater, potentially causing a lot of damage. And so Venus in Pisces, he's an example perhaps of Venus in Pisces working in many different ways. I mean, I know he was Sun in Capricorn, but that Venus sesquiquadrate Neptune, Venus in Pisces is about how he relates or doesn't relate, and what he does perhaps to stay sane or thinks he's staying sane. So, I mean, he was pretty much, I think he was on the verge of facing a court-martial when he sunk this ship. He was about to lose his command when he sunk the Wilhelm Gustloff because he had an alcohol problem. And he was drummed out of the Navy. I mean, he was sort of rehabilitated in the 60s. But perhaps at the time the Soviet Union was maybe slightly ashamed of him, or maybe he didn't behave as a submarine commander should have behaved. Anyway, he did have a drink problem, but also he had the ability to sink ships. And perhaps that's Venus in Pisces, just having a feeling for how to shadow a ship and how to fire a torpedo at the right moment. So continuing on a military theme, I mean, there are, I don't know whether you could say successful military commanders. The Hazim Soleimani. Now, it seems that Hazim Soleimani, he was an Iranian general who was in the Revolutionary Guards, who Trump killed him in Baghdad airport. And by all accounts, he was a genius. He sort of masterminded Iran's intervention in Syria, which up to a point was extremely successful. He had good relationships with the Russians. I heard somewhere that he actually persuaded the Russians to intervene in Syria. So he had a powerful influence, and clearly his killing was a big blow to Iran. And you can see that he had Venus in Pisces conjunct Mercury. So Celine Dion had Venus conjunct Mercury in Pisces. So you see she's using her Venus-Mercury conjunction in Pisces in a very different way. I mean, with Qasem Soleimani, he's using it, perhaps it's his charm, and also his just understanding perhaps of the military situation. And we don't know what time of birth his time of birth, but he has a moon in Cancer, possibly trine Venus, trine Mercury, and so he's able to use that in a military sense. And having good having an ability to be military successful, it can link with the sign water. I mean, Julius Caesar was a Cancerian, Alexander the Great was a Cancerian, so Rommel was a Scorpio. So there is a link with the water signs and military success. And I think in his case, it's to do with his Pisces planets. I think. Notice that Qasem Soleimani has Mars on Algol, Mars conjunct Mars at 26 Taurus. So perhaps a lot of the stuff he did on a military, from a military perspective, or some of the operations he planned, were pretty unpleasant. Plus Mars conjunct the South Node on Algol. So Qasem Soleimani was born on March the 11th, 1957, and Osama bin Laden was born on March the 10th, 1957. So Osama bin Laden was born the day before Qasem Soleimani. So, in a way, everything I've said about Qasem Soleimani applies to Osama bin Laden as well. I mean, he has Mars conjunct Algol, he has Venus in Pisces, he has Mercury conjunct Venus in Pisces. Does he have Moon in Cancer? He might have Moon in Cancer. He's got at noon in Riyadh on March the 10th, 1957. The moon was at 0 degrees 43 Cancer. So it's possible he might have Moon in Gemini, but I think he had some military skill, or at least a skill in terms of planning and executing terrorist operations, and I suppose running a terrorist organization. And that Mercury-Venus conjunction, which he shared with Qasem Soleimani, gives him perhaps negotiating skills. He has to get people to support him. I mean, in the end, Osama bin Laden was in Afghanistan, and he, I suppose, would have had to have negotiated with the Taliban, and so he must have had social skills with that Mercury-Venus in Pisces. Another military leader who had Venus in Pisces, who is not seen in a negative light, is George Washington. So there is George Washington's chart. So George Washington has Venus in 29-25 Pisces. We do have a time of birth for George Washington at 10 a.m. I don't think you can say that Venus is in Skeet, on conjunct Skeet, because you have to remember that Skeet, there is precession of the equinoxes, so it might seem that Venus is conjunct Skeet, but this was 1732, so Skeet would be a long way back from that. So you don't have Venus in Skeet. It would only be in a modern chart where Venus at 29 Pisces would be conjunct Skeet. So Venus in Pisces, again, if you're a military leader, you've got Venus in Pisces. I suppose you can feel out the lie of the land, you can feel out your enemy, and so it must have helped him in terms of dealing with the British, and I suppose also as being an effective president and understanding, what you need to do to rule a country. And I mean, he's still rated as one of America's best presidents. he sort of understood, what America needed to do, and so there is his Venus in Pisces. And I suppose we need to look at a couple of other people. Richard Dawkins. One might be surprised that Richard Dawkins has Venus in Pisces. So Richard Dawkins is, of course, known as he's an evolutionary biologist who's, of course, most famous for his atheism. I think he wrote that book, The God Delusion. So he is a militant atheist, as far as I know, and he has the Venus in Pisces. Now, he might well have Venus conjunct Skeet, Venus at 29 Pisces, Moon in Pisces, Mercury in Pisces. I don't know with Richard Dawkins. Why does he make so much noise about his atheism? It almost feels, at some level, he seems to be in denial about something. He's just, if you're an atheist, can't you just say it? I'm an atheist. But the way he pushes it so far, it's as if there's something he doesn't quite want to accept. I mean, that may be wrong there, but Mercury, Moon, Venus in Pisces, clearly someone who actually is very sensitive. And I mean, he could be in denial of his own sensitivity. He could be in denial of his own faith, or perhaps his faith has to manifest in a different way. I mean, faith is about believing in something, and perhaps he has complete faith in his atheism. It may be an act of faith, and I mean, I think he has been, criticised for perhaps being a little too vocal, a little too abrasive, and criticised not just by religious people but by his fellow atheists. So he has Mars in Capricorn, so I suppose he knows how to look after himself. And it's also interesting that his Venus in Pisces is opposition Neptune. So again, he comes over as being this very rational scientist, just focusing on the facts. Yet Venus opposition Neptune in Pisces, that doesn't perhaps fit. I mean, it is Neptune in Virgo. I mean, Neptune in Virgo is just trying to just reduce everything to things that are material. You try to transcend through Virgo. I mean, that's hard work. And so he has Venus opposition Neptune, and I just think there's something a bit strange, perhaps, about his atheism. And with Venus in Pisces, I suppose Venus in Pisces can be about just being able to respond very quickly, perhaps at an emotional level. Ayrton Senna, the racing driver who was killed in the 90s, he had Venus in Pisces. So you could say there is his Venus at 6 degrees Pisces. So Venus opposition Pluto. So Venus in Pisces may be about just understanding what's happening on the racing track and being able to feel what's going on, feeling what your fellow drivers are doing and how best to maneuver around things. Of course, in the end, he did die. He took it too far in the San Marino Grand Prix, which I think was in 1994. And finally, good, the bad, the absolute ugly with Venus in Pisces. Now, Venus in Pisces can be about fantasy, and it can be about fantasy taken too far. And Jeffrey Epstein was born on January the 20th, 1953, and Jeffrey Epstein has Venus in Pisces. And Venus in Pisces can be very good at getting people's support, getting people to like you, and he had a huge number of connections. Perhaps that helped with his Venus conjunct Mars. I mean, Venus conjunct Mars can be quite charismatic, but Venus conjunct Mars in his case, can be an obsession with sex. I mean, that's what Venus and Mars is about, and it's in Pisces, so it's something rather strange about it with that Venus-Mars conjunction. And so he perhaps represents Venus in Pisces at its worst. There were no limits to Venus in Pisces. There were no practical limits. The law didn't seem to matter. Morality didn't matter. Venus in Pisces just did whatever it wanted. So that's perhaps an example of Venus in Pisces out of control. So that's the astrology, and what I'm going to do now is look at the I Ching. So I'm going to do my reading for the week. Just a reminder, if you do not want your I Ching read, then you don't have to have it read. I'm not going to impose it upon you. If you don't watch the I Ching section, then this reading doesn't apply to you. So yeah, if you don't want your I Ching done, you can just stop watching a video now. Anyway, so in terms of the I Ching, I asked the question, what is the week starting on Monday, December the 30th, going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And of course, this reading is going to have 4 sections, which is going to be a general section, then money, then career, and then relationships. So, as far as this week is concerned, the week starting on Monday, December the 30th, the first hexagram I got was hexagram 58, which is the joyous. So the joyous sounds like a very good hexagram. I mean, you look at its structure, you've got this watery trigram, those top 3 lines, that represents a lake. So you've got a lake over a lake. So there's a lot of water there. And it is about perhaps having fun. I mean, it's kind of very appropriate that, this is a week where we've got New Year's Eve, it's Tuesday, New Year's Eve celebrations, seeing in the new year. So I suppose a lot of people are going to relax, enjoy themselves, have parties. And so there is a sense of just becoming part of something, part of the general merrymaking. So on the surface, certainly looks like a good hexagram, but there are different ways of seeing this hexagram, and it does seem that we may be in a situation where everything is very fluid, people are just a little bit too relaxed, and for ourselves, we need to understand what's going on. We need a bit of sobriety here, because what we don't want to do is just get caught up in it all. Because if we get caught up in it all, there could be problems, and we therefore have to be super sober, and we have to not be overwhelmed by the current. Yeah, other people might be having fun. Other people might be losing sight of reality, but not us. That's very important, that we don't get infected by it all. And the third line is moving. Third line from the bottom moving. So, with the third line from the bottom moving, there is a huge warning here. We mustn't be fooled. Pleasure is empty. I'm sorry to sound a bit puritanical here, but this is what it's suggesting. Empty pleasures, easy to get caught up in it, but that is something very much to be avoided, because that pleasure and that sense of satisfaction is kind of coming from outside. We don't have full control over it, and there's a huge danger of being distracted. Everyone's just relaxed, they're having fun, well, let's join in and it's all going to be fine. But no, that's not necessarily how it's going to work. And we might find that, if we are overwhelmed by it, we're not going to feel happy. We're not going to actually feel particularly joyous. We might be led into a situation where we potentially make mistakes. So it's very important over the week, regardless of what other people are doing, that we stay firm. and that we don't get caught up in a New Year merrymaking. Okay, maybe for you it doesn't matter. Maybe you're going to have a serious New Year, and that's not a problem. And because we have a moving line, we move to a different hexagram. And we move to a second hexagram, which is hexagram 43, which is breakthrough. And breakthrough is a hexagram which is about a warning. It seems that something has to be announced, because it does seem that something is going wrong. I mean, not for us necessarily, but we're perhaps in a situation which is not getting any better, and it's a time where we need to escape, and that's what's needed. So what the I Ching does is it talks about the cries of prisoners. So what it means by that is that the enemy are rampant. They're capturing prisoners. We can hear the prisoners being captured, and so we have a warning. So we have a chance to get out, and that's really what it's about. It's about getting out. It's a bad situation, and we need to leave. So I suppose you have to ask yourself, is there a bad situation where if you were to stay in it for too long, you would just get overwhelmed? But you have a warning. You have one warning. Maybe part of a warning is seeing other people being adversely impacted by something. You see other people being adversely impacted, and it may be that you're next, but you needn't be next, because you do have one chance to get out. So looking at things from a perspective of money, I would have said that as 2024 changes to 2025, we absolutely must not be complacent. I mean, I think there is the possibility of complacency. Everyone seems to be calm and relaxed, and they're not thinking about money. Maybe they're spending money. They feel it doesn't really matter, and it's just easy to go with the flow, and not to ask questions. And this isn't just money spent on entertainment; it's just money in general. So obviously, money may not be an issue for you, but if money is an issue, it's certainly suggesting that you should not be influenced by other people's relaxed approach. Just because people are relaxed doesn't mean to say that you should be relaxed. Of course, it may not be about your money. It may be about other people's attitude to money. You might be surprised by people's attitude to money. It just seems a little bit blasé. They just don't seem to be as worried perhaps as they should be. Everything's fine. It's a new year. It's a time to just go with the flow, but you know that you can't go with the flow, and it's as particularly important that you don't get caught up with something that could cost you money. And it's perhaps an idea, it sounds interesting, or a plan, or some event that's expensive, or whatever it is, getting caught up with something and getting involved, and you're not really enjoying yourself, you're not getting good value for money, whatever it is, and you do need to think for yourself, and you need to resist pressure, you need to resist temptation. And in terms of expenditure, just because other people are spending money doesn't mean to say you have to spend money. And you might feel that if you don't spend money, you're going to stand out. If you might get criticism, but you really do have to think for yourself with money, because if you don't think for yourself, you might be courting disaster. And this leads us to the second hexagram, which is breakthrough. And it's possible, in terms of money and how you're spending money, that you get a warning. Perhaps you see other people being financially indisposed, or you hear about other people losing all their money, and you see their distress. And if you're really honest with yourself, you might be thinking, well, it could be you next. But you do get a warning, and so it may actually be. And remember, this channel is for entertainment purposes only. I am absolutely not giving financial advice here, but there is an indication here that you have a chance to get out of something that is not going well financially. It's moving from bad to worse, and you have a chance to quit the scene before you fall off the precipice. But remember, I'm not giving financial advice. Yeah. I'm just reading the I Ching as it seems to me, and I'm just trying to relate to money. So you see other people's distress and you quit and you get out, and you don't have long to get out. Turning to career, it's the beginning of the year, isn't it? And so maybe you're not working. Maybe you don't work, maybe you're retired, maybe career is irrelevant to you. But in terms of career and business, if it is relevant to you, then the first hexagram we get is the joyous. And so there may be just a sense of general sort of relaxation and complacency, just a feeling that everything is fine. It's a new year, new opportunities, and from your perspective, you might just want to just go with everything, go with the flow, go with what other people are doing. But it is a dangerous situation at work, maybe, or perhaps if you have your own business, don't be complacent. There's no scope for complacency. There's no scope for being relaxed. Just because it's a new year doesn't mean that nothing is going on, that nothing should be attended to. There are certainly things that need to be attended to, and you shouldn't listen too hard to other people, particularly if other people are having a sort of relaxed approach. You're saying, well, you can do this, this will work, don't worry about it, this can be swept under the carpet. Hey, it's a new year, we don't have to do anything. If you listen to other people, then I think that could be a problem. Also, listening to other people's ideas. Other people might be very excited about something. This is the joyous. Maybe your co-workers, if you're in business with someone, they might be excited about something. They might think that something is going to work out, but they're not really looking at the details. And it's a temptation to just follow it through, listen to what people are saying, accept what people are saying. But reality is something is wrong, and this is absolutely a time where you need to think for yourself. And you must not get caught up in perhaps the over-optimism that some other people feel. You need to stand up to your principles and be ready to ask questions, even if your questions seem inappropriate. You're perhaps criticized for asking too many questions. Now you've got to be tough. And the joyous, it does move. It moves to hexagram 43, which is breakthrough. So what this hexagram means is that if you are working over the week, or something to do with your business over the week, this may be a very dangerous situation that you're moving into. And I know, nothing as much is supposed to happen as December moves to January, but it could. It could be a dangerous situation, and you need to get out. Perhaps you can see other people having trouble, other people failing, and it could be you next. And if you take timely action, I think you could save yourself a lot of trouble. And then finally, there is relationships. So the joyous kind of sounds a really nice hexagram for relationships. I mean, in a way, that's what the joyous is all about. It's the lake over the lake. It is a very emotional hexagram. And in terms of relationships, whatever the relationship is, whatever its nature, whether it's romantic, a business partnership, friendship, whatever it is, it just may feel to begin with that things are going well, that you have good relationships with other people, that there's a sort of a feeling of relaxation, that everything's going well. But the trouble is the third line moves, and the third line in the I Ching is often not a particularly fortunate line, and there may be an issue with the way you're behaving, the way the other person is behaving. They're just doing something that isn't right. Perhaps they're being too complacent. There may be on your part a complacency about a relationship, and I suppose that would particularly apply to a sort of a new relationship. I suppose if you've been in a relationship with someone for decades, well, not much can change, can it? I mean, particularly in just a week. But if it's a newer relationship where a week is an important unit of time, then things could go wrong. There may be a certain sense of complacency. It may be that one person is misunderstanding another person, or is perhaps taking liberties, and so that's possible. Just perhaps thinking about things on a sort of a surface level and just ignoring the underlying dynamics. Think, what is that relationship really about? Maybe you don't want to ask yourself those questions. You just want to take the relationship at a surface level and just say, well, it's all working fine. Why ask too many questions? But perhaps it's a time when you should be asking questions, because something is not right, I don't think, and you need to put yourself first, and you certainly should not be getting caught up in anything. And I suppose some people can be manipulative, and I suppose maybe they're trying to sell you something. That's possible, or try to get you to buy into something, and you don't want to allow yourself to be manipulated. And then this hexagram 58, the joyous, it does move. It does move to hexagram 43, which is breakthrough. And this hexagram is indicating that perhaps certain relationships are just not working, or perhaps you need to quit certain relationships. And again, this particularly applies to relationships which have just started. And again, I'm not necessarily talking about romantic relationships. Might have some other reason, but some relationships could be working very badly, and you may not realize how badly they're going. And then you get a warning. There is a warning. Perhaps you actually start to understand the nature of someone. Perhaps you hear what other people say. I suppose with a relationship you get reviews, don't you? I mean, okay, people don't get reviews on the internet, but you perhaps look at the bad reviews, and those are the warnings. So if someone is up to no good, then the breakthrough does indicate that you will get a warning, and once you get that warning, then you need to leave. So what would that mean if you are actually dealing with someone who you've been with for decades? Remember, this is only for 1 week, and so it just may say something about the way a relationship is going. It may be at not such a crucial level. It may be that an existing relationship has been moving in a particular direction, and you'd perhaps taken it for granted that it was at a stage in a relationship where everything was fine, and then you have to then you realize that no, it's not entirely fine. And so in this case, perhaps you have to stand up to your partner if it's a long-term relationship, and stand up to them and sort of perhaps say that something is not right. Perhaps it's about both of you considering a piece of action which would not be advisable, and you have a chance to say, no, this is not the right thing to be doing, and maybe you can save yourselves a lot of trouble. Anyway, that's my preview of the week. I hope you found that of some interest. Sorry the I Ching was a little bit negative, but it's just 1 week. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe, and if you want to buy me a coffee, then there is a link in the description. Anyway, I will talk to you again very soon.